Frank Saravalli, a.k.a. Kyle Davidson's human burner, spoke with Pat Boyle on the CHSN pregame show and was asked about the Hawks coaching search. Here's what he led with. This is a quote. The Hawks have had about 5 months to put their list together, and there's one name at the very top that's been circled that has separated himself from the rest of the pack, and that's David Carle from Denver University. Later in the segment, he talked about some of the other coaching vacancies that could happen, but he said if they don't get David Carle, they're going to take their time with the coaching search. So it sounds like they're trying to act quickly to get David Carle, and if that doesn't happen, he decides to stay or takes another team's offer, whatever it might be, then they will kind of wait to see where the chips fall and adding maybe someone who's already under contract, someone who might get fired after the season, whatever it might be. But it seems like, look, when Frank Saravalli goes on, state television, which is basically what CHSN is, and says they have circled David Carle as their top candidate.
Yeah.
That's not like him just throwing crap at the wall.
No. Yeah, that's pinpointed Blackhawks info.
Yes, he is being instructed to go on the air and say that. I mean, he was the first guy that had the Levshinov was going to get called up. Like he was the first guy that had the Korchinski was going to get called up. So like these are,
he's getting the info.
He's got the right numbers in his cell phone to get that information. But as we were talking about when we first heard this during the game, you don't put that out there unless you're pretty confident you can get them.
Right, with nothing behind it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you also run the risk of like lighting that fire and then not getting them, and people be kind of pissed. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. That's
you don't necessarily have that information out there to guys like that, like Saravalli or Friedman or whoever. That information doesn't usually get out there unless there's some credence behind it. And those guys in their job feel however you feel about Frank Saravalli. They more or less don't go forward with information like that unless they've double and triple checked to make sure that there actually is something there. They're not just going to spew out anything that they're told. They have people that they trust. So with Saravalli saying that in the pregame today, I pair that with what Elliot Friedman said a few days ago on 32 Thoughts, where, he was talking about not directly David Carle and the Blackhawks, but basically just David Carle and his, prospective NHL future. If he wanted to do it, he would want to go to a team that, financially it makes sense and there's a quote unquote path to victory. And then he threw in the caveat of, even if it's a team in a rebuild, if it makes sense that he can see the players there that provide a path to victory, and financially it makes sense, that would be an option for David Carle that Friedman said he feels he would entertain. So to me, that points at the Blackhawks. There is no salary cap on coaches. You can give them how much money you want.
And you're going to have to.
And for a rebuilding team, the players here, if the last 2 months have shown you anything, it's that this young group provides the early indications of a path to victory. And if you convince David Carle financially and with the prospect group and with all these young guys, some of whom he's coached before, either at Denver or Team USA for the World Juniors, guys he's familiar with, if you present that group with them and say, look, we know we're getting a top 4 pick this year. This is our free agency plan we're going to lay out in front of you. This is what our goals are for bringing in this team next year. You could lay out a really intriguing offer to a guy like that. And it's Chicago. It's the Blackhawks like that. There's a lot of cachet in the NHL with this organization. This is a great city, greatest of all time, in my opinion.
Goat.
And I don't know. I think for a team that is going to be looking for a new coach, that is in the rebuilding category, hopefully soon out of the rebuilding category, you can make a really good pitch to Carle.
And Saravalli made a good point too, in that coming to the Blackhawks lets David Carle grow on the job. If he's going to Boston or he's going to a team that is trying to win every year, which the Hawks will start doing soon, but if he goes to a team with expectations next year, He's learning to be an NHL coach on the fly while trying to contend. This situation with a path to victory, with you've already got your franchise player, you think you've got potentially 2 franchise defensemen, and maybe another franchise player coming this draft. The path to victory is there. This team's always willing to spend money up to the cap when it's time to do so. And he can learn the ropes of being an NHL coach, not the X's and O's of a game or managing a game, but the off-ice stuff, the meetings, those sort of things. He can learn while the team is getting better and better and better. So when they hit their prime, he is also now fully an NHL coach with a year or 2 of experience under his belt, and he's not learning right on, when they're trying to compete. To me, it's a very, and I know we're obviously biased, right? But if I'm a guy in David Carle's shoes, it's a very tempting way to begin my NHL career, is a place where I'm not expected to come in day one and compete for a playoff spot or a Stanley Cup.
Right.
I think that's very appealing.
Sure. But you look at the other teams that are going to be looking for coaches. You mentioned Boston.
He did mention Pittsburgh, by the way.
Did mention Pittsburgh.
Yes.
I've been saying for a long time that Mike Sullivan is my number 1 guy.
Checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
I do think it's going to be tough for the Blackhawks to get Mike Sullivan away from Boston. If Boston wants Mike Sullivan, I think he's going there because it's kind of like the Jim Montgomery St. Louis. I mean, Mike Sullivan is from Boston.
Yeah.
Mike Sullivan, do you remember who his son-in-law is? Charlie McAvoy happens to play for Boston.
I would not want that.
So, I think that's going to be a tough sale to get Sullivan to choose anybody over Boston if Boston wants him.
Sure.
And that is a Boston perfect hire for that team.
Right. Yeah.
So as much as I want Mike Sullivan, and I've been banging that drum since the middle of the year, in reality, it's going to be tough to get Sullivan to pick the Blackhawks over the Bruins.
Right.
So, but you look at Pittsburgh. Would David Carle want to go to Pittsburgh? Where's the path to victory in Pittsburgh? They're a team that's just waiting for Sidney Crosby.
They're on the verge of teardown.
Right, but they can't because there's no way that they can justify trading Sidney Crosby for picks and prospects.
Right.
That would so that's not the Hawks are better option there. Philadelphia's got some nice young. They got Mitchkov. They got some nice young, but they're not. They still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, John Tortorella hurt them last year by almost getting them to the playoffs when they should have been,
tanking.
Yeah. So you look at some of the other, teams that are going to be open. I think the Hawks have, for a guy like David Carle, have what he's looking for. A lot of young players that he's used to coaching, that he knows how to reach and get the best out of. It's a good fit. I've been saying all along, I want a guy with experience, but if those guys with experience either aren't available or don't want to come here because they're in win now mode, then I would not be upset with David Carle being the next Blackhawks coach. I'd still prefer a guy with experience, but if you are going to get a first-timer coach, he's like the only one that I'd be okay with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think so there's some people in the chat defaulting to experience. Like I saw Rick Bowness, and there was another name I saw in there.
Coaching.
There's Gerard Gallant.
No,
we know how that ends. We know how that story ends all the time.
No team in the National Hockey League wanted Gerard Gallant to be their coach this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason it's like something. 2 and done for that guy all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything wrong with. Yeah, is it risky to hire a first-time head coach? Of course. However, David Carle is a different kind of first-time head coach candidate. It's not just like, let's just pull a guy out of college or find a guy in the AHL. Some people saying Jeremy Colliton was a hot prospect. It's not the same. Jeremy Colliton was probably also hired 5 years before he was ready to be an NHL head coach. So David Carle is the inexperienced guy I would like them to hire. Otherwise, yeah, Mike Sullivan, happy with that. But do you want Peter Laviolette?
No.
What does that do for anybody?